federal government of Nigeria yesterday blamed the recent attack on a Kaduna-bound train on an unholy alliance between Boko Haram insurgents and rampaging bandits. Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, disclosed this at the State House, Abuja, while briefing newsmen along with Minister of Defense, Major General Bashir Magaji, retired, at the end of the weekly Federal Executive Council FEC meeting chaired by President Muhammadu Buhari. The government's latest position came as Benue State Governor Samuel Otom accused the Buhari administration of pretending not to notice the unremitted killings of innocent Nigerians. Otom, who spoke during an interview in Makurdi, also alleged plans by the government to yield power to criminal elements. That was as members of the House of Representatives yesterday at plenary reiterated their call on the federal government to declare a state of emergency on security in Nigeria. Reacting to recent escalations in insecurity, particularly the killings in Plateau State, the lawmakers demanded the sack of the National Security Advisor, NSA, Major General Babangida Mogunu, retired, and Minister of Defense, Major General Bashir Magashi, retired. Wow, here we go again, Tunde.
Yes, you know what comes to mind when I heard that phrase, unholy alliance? That exact same phrase was used by the exact same person, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, in 2014 about your former principal, saying that former President Goodluck Jonathan was in an unholy alliance with Boko Haram. And here we are, 8 years later, the exact same phrase being used. An awful lot has changed in Nigeria in 8 years, but unfortunately, not our security situation. If any changes have happened, it's actually worse at this point. And that's what's so scary. And the point that Alhaji Lai Mohammed is making is, of course, correct, that the banditry has now been elevated to the point of terrorism. We've seen that with the, well, eventually, a court got round to naming bandits, properly naming them, describing them as terrorists. And of course, these unholy alliances will be made. We saw what happened with Boko Haram when they now decided to pledge allegiance to ISIS. And it's scary, but I'm always trying to find a silver lining here. And when Boko Haram pledged their allegiance to ISIS, you'll recall that that actually worked out in the favor of all decent Nigerians, because that's actually what resulted in the death of the leader, Shekau, because there was a faction that then turned against him. So I'm trying to find a glimmer of hope, and hope that now that they've come together, they will somehow implode as they clash, because they do have reports of these issues every so often. There was the Shekau faction versus the Al-Banawi faction, who felt that this one was a lot softer than the other. There was Mama Nur, who was really respected amongst the ranks of terrorists, but then he was killed by his own people because they said he was too soft and he was now entering dialogue with the federal government. So the only hope that I can espouse here is hopefully they cancel each other out. As for the governor of Benue, Governor Otom, he's just determined to sort of be like the conscience of the federal government and of the country, to continually remind us of what is happening and the senseless murders that are happening in Benue State, innocent people being slaughtered. And yes, sometimes I do think that these calls that he makes are really necessary. We cannot really overstress the point. We remember those awful pictures of mass burials of people that were killed for no reason. So I think that he's really within his rights and doing what he ought to do. So is the House of Representatives. What they are calling for is personnel change, which I think was a general clamor at some point in this country, when eventually the president did listen and change the service chiefs. But has that worked? No, it has not.
Okay, in the last week, there have been killings in Benue, Plateau, Taraba, Anambra, the latest, also in Ebonyi, where 26 persons were killed and about 70 houses were razed. So one day after another since last week, we've been having killings across the country, north to south. I do not think it's particularly helpful that the best that the Minister of Information and the Minister of Defense, General Magashi, can provide after the Federal Executive Council meeting on Wednesday is to say that we are on top of the situation, according to the Minister of Information. According to General Magashi, government is on top of the matter. These are familiar things that we've had all the time. And then they promise that government cannot divulge the efforts being made because of the security implications and the lives involved. Now, the relatives of the affected persons who are still in the custody of the terrorists, would not also consider that helpful, because they had even given the federal government an ultimatum of 72 hours. What they intend to do after 72 hours to government, I have no idea whatsoever. But it would have been more helpful if we had heard that, oh, by now, maybe government has been able to locate where the bandits or terrorists are, and government agencies have been able to free some of the abducted persons. But that has not happened. As to the statement that the bandits are colluding with Boko Haram, well, that's a no-brainer, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Because already, given the scale of the attack on that train on March 28, it was immediately disclosed that this was not the handiwork of ordinary bandits, that this was the handiwork of terrorists using sophisticated weaponry. And from the videos that we have seen, we have also seen that this was not the handiwork of persons on motorcycle. So it's something more serious. So what, the relatives and the rest of the country will be comforted by is an indication that those persons, serious efforts have been made to rescue them. Now, on account of the feelings that government is not doing enough, you have had the Northern Elders Forum coming forward to say that the president himself should resign. The presidency has replied to say that that is not going to help anything about the security situation in the country. The House of Reps at plenary yesterday entertained two motions of urgent national importance. A motion raised with regard to the Plateau killings, a second motion raised by two gentlemen with regard to the Benue killings. And during plenary, a number of conclusions were reached. First, it was resolved that the National Security Advisor, the Minister of Defense, should be removed from office. That's the point that they made, because they've not been able to make any difference. Second, the lawmakers also allege that the security agencies are profiting from the insecurity in the country, because more money has been devoted to security efforts, and yet no result is being produced. And that their suspicion is that these security chiefs may not do anything concrete, so they should go. The third point that was made at the plenary was that, look, security agents are the ones colluding with these so-called bandits and terrorists. And Ahmed Wase, I think that's his name, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Reps, Mr. Honorable Wase, raised the point that in his own community in Zamfara, there was the case of a particular gentleman who was the one, in fact, distributing uniforms to bandits and terrorists, and that nothing has been done to the man, and that he's a serving soldier, and that is the kind of situation that we have in the country. And then, of course, it has been reported that not just the Northern Elders Forum, all kinds of other associations, CSOs, particularly, Christian Association of Nigeria and others, have also expressed concern. So the biggest problem that we have at this moment, is this same challenge of security that government has not been able to find solution to. Although Garuba Shehu, in the statement he issued yesterday to say that asking the president to resign will not change anything, pointed out that the government has done a lot in the northeastern part. But how about all these regular reports from Benue to Plateau to Taraba to Anambra to Ebonyi? I'm sure nobody can say that those reports are fictitious.
It has to be said, insecurity is a monster that we built in this society by ourselves. Because when you look at the stories coming out, everybody seems to be a part of it. We remember the case of Wadume, a daredevil criminal arrested, that the police did a good job to arrest. Who released him? Who set him free?
Soldiers. Some
soldiers even killed our finest police officers. Now we're hearing about another case in Zamfara, where a soldier is giving bandits, criminals, uniforms to use. Because you wonder how they even get military fatigues to wear in the first place. You see the case of Rivers, where NSCDC officials, security officials, are part of those perpetrating the crimes of bunkering. In fact, security officials are leading the crime. I ask, what is wrong with Nigeria? The night watchman has become the thief. So it is something that society has created. We need to dig ourselves out of this hole because it is becoming problematic. Across all fronts, It is time for government to do what government will normally do. A country where non-state actors have the monopoly of violence is a country that should be scared of its future and existence. Nobody should have more violence than the government. No bandit, no terrorist should have more violence than the government. But it looks as though these people now have more violence than the government. So the government should step up. We're sick and tired of these commiseration messages. It's becoming too much. Something is being done, but we are not seeing anything. If you say something is being done, we don't see anything, it's as good as nothing is being done. This is the time to face the problem squarely. We are just another 1 or 2 hours away from the next attack. That's what Nigeria has become today. It is a sad reminder of the failures we see everywhere. And these are the facts on ground. Babies, young people terrorize this country. How old is Bello Tuji? I will be shocked if Bello Tuji is about 30 years of age. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Rotus, we have Michael, we have Adesua, Aaron Akerjola to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19 and sporting activities. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Moving on to global business update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. It's been a night of tightening, basically. South Korea and Singapore, both central banks actually tightening there. Markets actually quite liked it. Markets tend not to like higher interest rates, but once again, I think there's this kind of feeling that, if they're getting to grips with inflation, then it's no bad thing for equities. Hopes of policy easing in China as well. The amount of money that banks have to hold on their books against any kind of default is kind of weakening very, very. It's being diluted very, very slightly, I think is the way to put it, in China, and that's helping Chinese stocks. We move our attention to India, and we know that India bought some cheap Russian oil. Now it's felt as though it's turning its attention to coal imports from Russia. They jumped in March to highs not seen for a very long time. The European Commission has banned all this stuff, and Washington fired warning shots at India about it, as it were, across the bows. The feeling from Washington is we won't be doing this for a third time. So, it looks as though if they do this, this likely won't be a third time, and it will take action against India for doing this. Let's turn our attention to Sri Lanka, and 2 ratings agencies are worried about what's going on there. The citizens most certainly are, but now you've got Fitch and you've got S&P, Standard & Poor's, actually both saying that they feel as though the debt default has begun in that country. And again, this is all that part of the world, isn't it? India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, all these countries going through big political turmoil as we speak. The United States stock futures just inching higher. Basically, the reason for that is that we're coming into sort of reporting season. It looks as though they digested those high inflation figures yesterday, and we've seen Delta, Fastenal and BlackRock, which came in better than expected. We've got big banks coming up today. JP Morgan, though, yesterday showing how much the pandemic has actually affected them, but the Dow and the Nasdaq down more than 0.5%. We look out today for Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley and Citigroup to see how they've been weathering the storms. The EU, the ECB meets today. They'll be looking at high inflation, particularly in Germany. Will they tighten? They've been very, very loath to do anything. They've been looking at it and observing observing it. Will they be altering? I ask these questions because I don't know what's going to happen. But we'll know this afternoon. Rotis and I will no doubt be talking about this on the Global Business Report. As far as the UK is concerned, Tesco tripled its profits, but it, along with the other supermarket sector, took quite a hit as far as shares are concerned, because what it warned was that it's going to keep a lid on prices, which means less profit margins for all of them, and that included Sainsbury's and Marks and Spencer's, which were marked down yesterday. It's at a very, very tough backdrop for customers as well, because remember, there's a cost of living crisis in the UK, and they're going to be facing higher bills from elsewhere. So basically, supermarket stocks, normally seen as staples, are actually down. Oil prices up a little. Expectations that OPEC would increase their production, don't think so. Unsurprisingly, OPEC are saying nothing to do with us. Nothing to see here. Let's walk the other way. And gold, actually, because of all the inflationary pressures now, looking at sort of $2,000 an ounce. It'll take a while to get there, and whether it actually gets to that kind of psychological level is anybody's guess. But gradually, there's a feeling of support for the precious metal. That's the global view this morning.
Right, Michael, two things. Number one, 7.5% inflation rate in the UK. That inflation number, just like in America too, is well above wage increase. And what that means is that a lot of people will become poorer. In fact, over 2 billion has been taken out in credit card debt. The economy is overheating, cost of living allowance, energy crisis in the UK. Is UK well on its way to a recession? And I'd like to ask you this, the second question. Was Milton Friedman wrong? Was the likes of Maynard Keynes wrong? You know, with this idea of boost the economy, spend your way out, helicopter money, drop it down. Is it that they never thought about inflation? Because the inflation can cream off the effect of government spending. 1 minute, a lot of Americans had so much money in their hands that they didn't want to work. The next minute, inflation has eaten that money away.
Milton Friedman and John Maynard Keynes had very, very much opposing views on the economy. Keynes was the spend man, the government spend, and Milton Friedman most certainly was not. That's why he was one of the people who was Margaret Thatcher's, one of her favourite economists, who said that you've got to beat inflation with high interest rates. As I understand it from history, I think there's two ways of looking at this. Yes, you're absolutely right in everything that you say about the pressures which face central bankers and face the economies of the UK and the United States. They are very, very different. The one being very much bigger than the other, and the one actually racing away in terms of employment, which is the United States. Both, though, asking the same question: are we seeing a spike, and will inflation level off next year when these price rises work their way out of the system? That's what we're really looking at, and it takes bigger brains than me, certainly, to answer those kind of questions. That's what we pay central banks for. I think that, so therefore, I think it's still a question, as I was saying yesterday, not about continuing inflation, but whether or not this is a spike or not, and whether these concerns will level off next year, or at least as this year actually plays its way out, Q3 and Q4.
Well, how much worse can things get in Sri Lanka? You know, the other day I was asking whether this will lead to the exit of President Rajapaksa, who seems to be very much alone in the face of rising inflation and other crises in that country. And Sri Lanka is going into debt default for the first time since its independence from the UK, from Britain in 1948. Now, Sri Lanka, one. The second thing, what is this thing about Plan Rwanda, about, the UK authorities trying to push migrants from across the English Channel all the way to Rwanda, about 4,000 miles away, at a price of 120 million pounds, and with a pretty pato, the Home Secretary saying, a deal has been struck with Rwanda. And I see a lot of, activists, are protesting that this is dystopia, and that this is inhumane. I know it may sound political, but who is going to bear the cost in real terms?
Well, as I say, it is intensely political. I don't think it's got a great deal to do with economics and business. But for what it's worth, this is an attempt to try to make it less worthwhile for people smugglers to actually say, you come with us, you can go straight into Britain and start drawing benefits. This is where males are actually going to go to Rwanda. Yes, it does sound rather clumsy, and a lot of human rights people are up in arms about it, because they're saying, how dare they? These people are befuddled and muddled and don't really know what they're doing. And yet suddenly here they are on a plane to Rwanda, having just landed on UK shores. It's one attempt. It's very, very difficult to avoid the rescue services here being seen as a taxi service, basically bringing illegal immigrants into the country, and then there being no trace of them. So it is an attempt. However clumsy it certainly sounds clumsy to me. I agree with you, but we'll see. As far as as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, politically, I've no idea what's happening in that country. All I can do is, I think when you've got two agencies like S&P and Fitch saying that, a debt default is coming up, and as you quite rightly observed, this is the first time this has happened since its independence all those years ago. There's something very, very wrong here, and it may be that the people rise up and depose the government. I have absolutely no idea, but I feel as though the IMF will probably step in, because it will be seen as an important jigsaw piece within that particular part of the world. And again, nobody likes countries like that to fail, given its record in the past of entrepreneurialism and also high quality exports.
Well, thank you, Michael.
All right. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adesua Mora is here with us. Adesua, good to see you again. Lady in black.
Good morning, Rufai. Good to be here again. Good morning, Tundu, and good morning, Dr. Abati. Yes. Morning. Okay, so we do have the latest pandemic toll figures for the last 7 days as provided by the WHO. But we have the larger picture since the pandemic started, as reported by the Johns Hopkins University tally, which you should have on your screen any moment from now. But what does the WHO say? It says from the 4th of April through the 10th of April, the number of new COVID-19 cases and deaths have declined for a third consecutive week. That's good news. With over 7 million cases and 22,000 deaths reported, and that's a decrease of 24% and 18% respectively, as compared to the previous weeks. All the 6 regions of the world, as graded by the WHO, are now reporting the decreasing trends in cases and deaths. Well, a quick look at the vaccination figures here in Nigeria, as we do not have the latest virus data. For vaccination in Nigeria against COVID-19, 18.3% of those targeted and that are eligible, that's 18 years and above, have been partially vaccinated in Nigeria, while 12.3% others have been fully vaccinated. So we've had a slight movement. We do have these vaccines on ground, but not enough people seem to be showing up to roll their sleeves up and get the jabs into their arms. Away from Nigeria, but still on the African continent here, researchers in Botswana and South Africa have now detected new sublineages of the Omicron variant of the coronavirus and are carrying out further investigation to fully understand crucial traits such as infectivity and virulence. Well, the identified sublineages are BA4 and BA5. It's understood that WHO experts are working with scientists and researchers in both countries. Well, in Botswana, these new sublineages have been found in 4 people, while in South Africa, it's been identified in 23 people. Well, currently, there's no significant epidemiological difference between the new sublineages and the pre-existing ones, which are the BA1, the BA2, and the BA3. I think the Tony Blair Institute for Global Governance and Global Change had already told us that we were likely to see, they've pointed out a trend to say almost every 6 months, we should see new variants. So to a lot of people, especially the Tony Blair Institute, this will not come as a surprise. To the UK, where Boris Johnson has apologized for breaking lockdown rules, but denies doing it on purpose. He becomes the first British Prime Minister to break laws while in office. The Prime Minister and his wife had paid fines issued by the police to those who attended a birthday party thrown for the Prime Minister at his Downing Street office on June 19, to be precise, 2020, the Prime Minister's birthday. At that time, gatherings of more than 2 people were banned to curb the spread of COVID-19. He has so far deflected demands for his resignation. And finally, to the U.S., where the CDC is extending the nationwide mask mandate for public transportation for another 2 weeks. This is despite the pressure from the airline industry. The CDC says that it's been monitoring the cases of COVID-19, particularly the Omicron and the BA2 subvariant, which now makes 85% of all cases seen in the country. It says that an uptick seen from the beginning of April is now making it take that decision to extend the mask mandate. It says, of course, it's out of the abundance of caution. That means that the mask mandates on public transportation in the U.S. will now last through to May 3rd. Back to you guys.
Okay, do we start from the U.S.? You know that the COVID mandate, the mask mandate rather, has been very controversial within the in the United States, and there is division. And the argument by the airlines is that why should it be just the airlines, and other means of transportation, buses, trains, that will be compelled by the Transportation Security Administration, the TSA, which is the body in charge of transportation in the U.S., that will now require people to still wear masks. Whereas in schools, in restaurants, in crowded spaces, that mask mandate has been lifted since last month. So the airlines, they are not really cooperating. But the position of the Centers for Disease Control is that there has been a spike in the BA2 variant in the United States in the last few weeks, rising from about 25,000 per day to about 30,000 per day. And about 85% of those cases have been found to be the BA2 variant. So this is just an investigative process to see whether indeed, this spike in cases of BA2 variant will result in severe illnesses or hospitalizations. But the thing to note, of course, is that this is very controversial because the airlines insist that they have a system, that will not make it possible for people not wearing any mask to infect others in the aircraft. But of course, this controversy is everywhere.
Yeah, filtering.
The travel and tourism industry are trying to open up. Now, as for the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, may still find himself in very hot water by next week when the members of parliament return from recess. So the calm that we have seen this week may just be calm before the storm. He has offered an apology. He says he has offered full apology and that he has paid the fine that was imposed on him. But more fines are likely to come along. Insiders in Downing Street say that 3 more fines are being expected. Now, at a moral level and in terms of credibility, how is he going to leave that down? With the opposition protesting, and even one of his own people, the Justice Minister, Lord Wolfson, having turned in his resignation yesterday, saying that, look, he thinks that they've turned Downing Street into the equivalent of a criminal enterprise, where criminal laws, are being breached routinely. Now, he's the first government minister to resign. Will there be more? Will there be more pressure on Boris Johnson? But Boris Johnson is saying that, one, he has urgent business in Ukraine with the leadership role that, Britain is playing there. Okay, how is the crisis in Ukraine of more urgent importance to the people of Britain? And then he says, of course, he wants to focus fully on economic recovery in the face of the very high cost of living crisis that the United Kingdom is facing. But the bottom line is, as expressed in the January report by Sue Gray, the senior civil servant who first conducted investigation, although into the non-criminal aspects of the violation of the rule, that there is a crisis of leadership. There's leadership failure. So that is the issue. Can we have a leadership in Britain that will make laws and that will be notorious for breaking the same laws? So that is the main dilemma. But Boris Johnson's supporters say that, well, at this time, Britain cannot afford to change its prime minister because there are more urgent issues and that this is not the time for leadership contest. Well, that's neither here nor there. We'll hear more about this story from next week.
Yeah, but it does appear that the answer to your question, I don't know if it was rhetorical, is that yes, Britain can have a leader who makes laws and breaks the laws. Sue Gray's report, in spite of all the hard work and what have you that she put into it, has completely lost momentum, thanks to the blundering intervention of the Metropolitan Police. You'll recall how they stepped in and insisted that she only published a highly redacted version. And really, the whole situation has just run out of steam. Then we now have the Ukraine war, which is being exploited in quite the most revolting fashion by Boris Johnson and his supporters, using that and saying, can't you see there's a war going on? What's a little fine, a £50 fine, compared to a war? It's been the genuine suffering, the murder, the rape, the, refugee crisis that's building in Europe is been exploited by Boris Johnson because he insisted on having a birthday party. I mean, you really cannot make this up. It's a disgrace, quite frankly. But it does appear, I was saying yesterday that somebody who knows him very well, former Prime Minister David Cameron, described him as a greased piglet, because you just cannot hold him to anything. He finds a way to wriggle out, and it appears that he's going to do that this time. He has broken ministerial code because there's the allegation that he lied to Parliament, but it appears that he will hang in there, because really, what is the option? We've had Rishi Sunak, who has been touted as a possible replacement for Boris Johnson. He has had the most torrid few weeks, and he's also been fined. So in practical terms, if he goes, who will replace him? So right now, I think the momentum has just run out of steam, and he's going to get away with it as usual.
But Tundu, we look forward to a day where the grisliest of pigs becomes very good steak or bacon, and hopefully that happens to Boris Johnson, because it's not done.
He'll get his comeuppance one day.
Because it's not done. There were people that passed that they couldn't see their loved ones pass because of COVID. This same Boris Johnson wrote a letter to a 10-year-old telling her why she should not have a party this year, because they're doing something he called, a national assignment to fight against COVID and all of that. But he couldn't just postpone his birthday party for another 1 year, despite the fact that he almost died of COVID. In fact, it was really close. The Westminster sources says, at a point when Boris Johnson was at St. Thomas Hospital, it was touch and go for Boris Johnson. He could have died because of COVID. But no, he went ahead, broke all the laws, did the party. And thank you so much. Because if he didn't have a fight with Dominic Cummings, we will not know all of this happened in the first place. So thank you so much, Dominic Cummings, and everybody that revealed all the shenanigans all the British leaders did during COVID, including the health secretary that was busy, kissing somebody in his office. Matt Hancock, and that person had a brother that got heavy COVID concessions, as regards supplies and the likes, So we know all the contracts, we know all the corruption and the scam that happened during COVID. But Boris Johnson should take the moral high road here. If he is smart enough, he should leave. And all of this deflecting that he's doing will not help him. They deflected at first with Ukraine. Now they're even deflecting with this Rwanda scheme now, because that's what they're selling in the media now. Let's talk about that. When this story broke a couple of weeks ago, they deflected with saying, there's a cost of living crisis, so let's focus on that. But you see, all the layers are falling out. For the Metropolitan Police to even do this work and issue fines in the first place was because Cressida Dick was taken out by the mayor of London. It's Sajid Javid, what's his name? Sadiq Khan didn't do that work of taking Cressida Dick out, which we all thought was going to do a good job, but she too herself was found very complicit in all of this. Then we will not have these fines in the first place, coming out. So when you look at it, all the institutions, the structures, Dr. Bati talked about the Justice Minister resigning today, everybody is against Boris. I'm sure the 1922 committee, they are looking and they are waiting with bated breath. He can, wriggle himself out of all of this all he wants. But one thing is certain. No matter how the pig, wriggles itself and goes woo out, it ends up on the table as very good cured bacon. And that will be Boris Johnson's lot.
Well, I think it's more ludicrous when the Prime Minister says he didn't know he was breaking the law. The law by his own government.
He knew he was breaking the law. Boris Johnson is a lawbreaker. The first major offense of Boris Johnson was he made up a quote while he was working as a journalist. And he was sacked for that. He made up a quote. So Boris Johnson and sleaze is akin to bread and butter. That's who this man has always been. Let's call him what he is. Let's call his speed his speed. All right, we will go for a quick break. Thank you so much, Adesina.